hello to everyone on Zoom. I suppose I'm looking down there. Oh, just here. It's great to be here, and it's great to have so many of you here with us live today. As Carol has said, it's been a long trial, and some of you may not realise, but at North Melbourne we've been going live since before Christmas, and it's really good to be able to be here at Ringwood East and have that part of our organisation up and running again. And there has been great effort by many more than me to make it possible, I can tell you that. So today I'm sort of going to follow along the lines of what Carol's been talking about, and I'm going to start with a reading from Silver Birch because I think it's a reminder of really of what we're all about, because it's so important. And this is from a little book called Guidance from Silver Birch, and it's a rather old copy, which I treasure. And he talks about the work that we're doing. And he says, any who work as instruments of spirit power are touching souls all the time. And that is the most important aspect of mediumship. To give comfort to the mourner, to heal the sick, to give a demonstration of spirit power in all its aspects, mental or physical. These are very important, and no one can gainsay that. But their purpose goes beyond anything physical. Their purpose is to touch the soul of the individual so that it becomes awakened to reality. Your world is full of so many millions whose souls are still slumbering, who are dead to truth and have yet to awaken. The function of all mediumship is to make the individual aware of himself so that his own soul comes to the fore. He realises that he is a spiritual being. Having become conscious of his spiritual nature, the divine seed implanted within him as part of his natural heritage should begin to grow. From that moment, the individual is playing his part in helping the infinite creative power which is responsible for the whole universe. Before any individuals can be qualified to be instruments of the Spirit, they must undergo training. The training is a very rigorous one because it has to endure a certain discipline, a certain confidence, and though these can come only through suffering. The lot of an instrument must be a hard one, not an easy one. If mediums were to be found without trouble, they would not be qualified for their task. The spiritual side of their nature must be tried and tested to see that they can withstand the kind of experience which will profoundly stir to their highest and deepest possibilities. That is their own equipment. That is their spiritual armoury. And he goes on to say, when people come to you, the important thing is that you can touch their souls. To give a message from a loved one is very helpful. It helps the one in our world and the one in your world. But the whole purpose of that upliftment, the whole lesson to be learned from that, is that the soul of the one in your world should be touched and made aware of the spiritual realities, which are the only eternal standards which exist in the universe. To give a message of comfort is very important. To heal the sick is very important. To work as I am doing is not so important. But the whole aim of our world and all who return from it is to quicken the spiritual awareness of the individuals in your world. And that is the work you are doing. So that's Silver Birch's thoughts on what we do. And the reason that I sort of started on that topic was actually because a week or so ago I've been staying at my daughter's place to help out. And my 10-year-old granddaughter, we were having a conversation, and she said, Nanny, you're going to be here tonight when I come home. And I said, no, I won't be here tonight because I've got to go home, I've got work to do. And she said, oh, but Nanny, you said you'd retired. And I said, well, yes, I've sort of retired and I work close by where they are at a doctor's surgery, just part-time. I said, I have sort of retired, but I'm going home because I've got some work to do, some of my church work to do. And she said, oh, well, why do you do that still? And I'm speaking to a 10-year-old, of course. Mind you, their father has unkindly told them already that I talk to dead people. So she already knows that. And I've talked about, how that works in very simple terms. Fortunately, she knew her great-grandmother, so she's a reference point in that conversation. So anyway, I said to her, it's because often people are very sad when someone dies or something terrible's happened in their life. And if we talk to them, we can help them to understand that that person's not really gone. And it makes them feel better. I said, it doesn't fix it, but it does make them feel better. And it gives them a bit of hope so that they can go on and have a good life. So I guess that's why I do it. But if I'm giving you the answer to that question, I'll make it perhaps a bit deeper and talk about the things that Carol has mentioned and Silver Birch mentioned. Of course, mediumship is what draws most people to our organisations. And that's great, because people come for messages from their loved ones, and that does give them exactly what I said to my granddaughter. But they don't often wonder about how that really works. They just want the messages. And I sometimes wonder, as they walk away, if they've really added one and one together and got two or got three or stayed with just one. Because I think sometimes their minds aren't ready to take on the concept of having had that conversation with the medium, with their loved one, actually means. I don't think most people are able to really take that on board, certainly not on the first occasion. So it's a much slower awakening, a much slower journey. How do we possibly help people to understand what the spirit world is really all about when we haven't been there yet? We can only go by what we're told from wonderful guides and inspirers like Silver Birch and the other guides that we have the honour of listening to in our classes and from the platform on occasion. But the spirit world don't seem to tell us much about what they do they? And I was talking about this to a lady I read for just on Thursday, and I said, we ask them all the time, what do you get up to in the spirit world? But they don't really tell us. My mum hasn't been back and told me what she's doing. And I said, what are you up to, Mum? Tell me. But she doesn't. So how do we explain that in simple terms? There's lots of great books we can read. There's a wonderful book called Life in the World Unseen, and Harry Edwards has written a wonderful book called Life in Spirit. And if you haven't read them, they're really good to read to give you an idea of their versions of what life in the spirit world's about. So I think it's important that we take our minds deeper than the actual message we get from our loved one. Otherwise, we're missing the whole point of the learning task, as Silver Birch tells us and reminds us as mediums. Our job, first and foremost, is to touch the soul of the person that we have the opportunity to work with. So because they've come seeking word from a loved one, reassurance that their loved one is all right, then that gives us an opportunity to take them a step further, to take them back in a circle to themselves, because they really need to know what they're all about. It's lovely to know what our loved ones are up to, But it's really more important to know who we are. You know, we wonder in what form are our loved ones in the spirit world, and we've got no way really ever of understanding that, because that's beyond our capability in this world. But we do have the ability to understand ourselves, to take the time to get to know ourselves and to know who we really are. Most of us probably don't get to that point till the end of our lives, when we have time for reflection. But let's, as this new year starts, and certainly as Carol has said, you know, last year was a terrible challenge for all of us, and it will be a challenge in the months to come. But if we got through last year, we can certainly get through this year. So don't doubt yourself in that ability, but use it as a time of reflection now, not in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. Use it now to understand who you are. And if you do want to work for spirit, you don't have to be a medium to do it. Let's start out small. Do it in our everyday lives, because as we become more aware of our own spiritual connections, that gives us added strength. I love that song. We sing it sometimes here. We sing it in at North Melbourne, You Raise Me Up. And in that song, you know, the words are, I sit and wait for you to come. Well, that's what our meditation's all about, isn't it? Waiting for that awareness to come. It's less about reaching out, it's more about waiting. And as we wait, we have a time to talk to ourselves, have a time to think about what we want to achieve. Last year was a great year for reinvention, wasn't it? People had to reinvent themselves in many shapes and forms. I watched a thing on the telly this morning. I can't remember the name of the company, but it was about a company somewhere in the back blocks of New South Wales that can't even remember what they were making, but had something to do with the mining industry, and because that's going down the gurgler for all sorts of reasons at the moment. So with all the other problems, they had that as well. And so they had to reinvent themselves. And they were one of the companies that started making the ventilators that we so badly needed here and around the world. They reinvented themselves. They used their knowledge for something else. They used their resources for something else. Every one of us has resources and knowledge that we can use for something else. So ask yourself the question as this year unfolds, do I need to reinvent myself? Has something fallen away that I relied on before? It may be in a work situation, it may be in a personal situation. And if it has, how do I use the resources and knowledge that I already have to reinvent myself and go on and take more steps on a path that I can be happy with and I can be useful with? So we all hear about positive thinking, and we do have to be positive in our thinking. But positive thinking and affirmations, they're not enough. They're great and we need them, but we have to be proactive. We have to take responsibility for ourselves and not rely on others. As I do readings on occasions, you know, people come looking for answers from the spirit world. And the spirit world will certainly be there with us and work with us to help us in those challenges that we have. And I'm sure most of you would have felt that around you in the past months. But they can't do it for us. And they can't always give us the answers because they simply don't know. Our world is changing so much. And some of you might say, well, you know, Nostradamus predicted what was going to happen now hundreds of years ago. And that turns out to be true. But I don't know how that works. But then there's things in our everyday lives that they certainly can't predict, and we don't really want them to. So we have to take responsibility, but we can ask the spirit world to help us to find the right places to seek the knowledge so that we can go on and make changes in our own lives that are wise choices and go further. When we think about people that have passed of the older generation, you know, I don't know, all of us will have been to a funeral of someone who's passed in their 80s or 90s. And I'm always in awe when I listen to the journey they've had from childhood, you know, till they've got to that age when they've passed. Those people have reinvented themselves over and over again because they had to, all the difficulties they had in life. They've gone from a child that perhaps didn't have shoes to wear, didn't have a school to go to, didn't have a loving home, didn't have an education. And somehow they get to places. An uncle of mine, he started out just like that, and he ended up working out at the airbase at Point Cook, helping with the aerodynamics on aeroplanes. How does that happen? He reinvented himself. He sought to learn, he sought to use his intelligence to find a way to do something purposeful in his life. So don't ever think that you're not capable of doing something just like that. We're all not going to be brain surgeons, that's for sure. But we all have talents. We all have abilities where we can connect because of who we are, because of the spirit that we carry with us. We're spirit first. Always remember that. We're spirit first. Now, I did ask Carol, did she want me to ask if anyone had a question? Is it too late for that? That's fine. I didn't mean to talk as long as I did. So I thought, seeing we've probably got a few people here who are new to us, just like my granddaughter had a question. Before we finish, is there a question that someone would like to ask? We don't have a lot of time. Yes, sir.
I have a big doubt about who we are, because we got a personality and we have the higher self into ourselves. Now, which one is the one who has over into the spirit world, and where the other one stay on?
Okay, I should have asked the question. I'll do my best. I'll do my best. So I think your question is asking the parts of us, we have our higher self as well as our physical consciousness. That would be what you would mean.
Yeah.
And when we pass over, what part of us goes into the spirit? I think that was your question. Yeah. I can give you my understanding of that. As I just said, we are a spirit first. We have a physical body, we have a physical mind, and we understand as spiritualists that our brain is the tool for the mind. It isn't the mind. The brain's the hard drive. The mind is the software that runs it. If we want to, that was clever, wasn't it? So that's a simple way of understanding that. And our higher consciousness is our physical consciousness, is connected to our physical consciousness, but it is the bridge between our physical consciousness and our spirit consciousness. I'm just being told that. So that is what goes with us into the spirit world, but we still take our personality. Don't ask me to explain that scientifically because I can't. But I know, and both Helen and Jackie will know, and Carol and anyone else that does mediumship work will know that we take our personality with us into the spirit world, because when we come back and bring messages, that's the part that we as mediums connect with when we're working, don't we? We connect to the higher consciousness that carries with it the personality of the person in the life they had here. Now, later on, as they increase in their spiritual knowledge and their vibration raises even more, we're taught that, you know, they move on to higher levels and eventually they move on to beyond the astral that we connect with to a higher plane. So I'm not talking about those planes because we don't every day have connection to those planes, do we? So their personality certainly goes on as part of the higher consciousness, I believe, but we leave our physical aspects behind when we move into the spirit. How does that sound? Does that make sense? It's a dilemma, isn't it, trying to understand all these things. But, you know, Silver Birch tells us he doesn't care whether we use the word spirit or soul or higher consciousness or any of those things. What he cares about is who we are, what we are, our motive, how we develop our spirit. As in the reading, it's about how we grow, and that's how our spirit, that's how our humanness carries us into the spirit world. That's why we're here. We're here to evolve in our knowledge and our spiritual awareness, to make us more spiritually attuned. So I better stop now, I think. I'm not asking for any more questions. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.